Imagine finding your dream home, a beautiful 6-bedroom house in a quiet, idyllic suburb. You've saved up, you've signed the papers, and you're ready to start a new chapter with your family. This was the reality for the Broaddus family in 2014 when they purchased 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. It was perfect. Or so they thought. Their dream quickly descended into a living nightmare. Just 3 days after closing on the house, while doing some renovations, Derek Broaddus went to check the mail. Tucked among the usual bills and junk mail was a thick, white, cardstock envelope. There was no return address. It was addressed simply to the new owner. He opened it, and the words inside sent a chill down his spine. The letter began innocently enough. "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood." But the friendly tone vanished almost immediately. "How did you end up here?" the writer asked. "Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within?" The letter's author identified themselves only as the Watcher and claimed a chilling, multi-generational obsession with the house. "My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s and my father watched in the 1960s. The letter continued, "It is now my time." "Do you know the history of the house? Do you know it lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out." The family's initial confusion quickly turned to sheer terror. This wasn't a prank. This felt deeply personal and menacing. The Watcher's letters became more specific, more intrusive. They knew the family's name. They knew the number of children they had, and even their birth order. The writer referred to the children as young blood, a phrase that haunts you to your core. "You have children?" "I have seen them," one letter stated. "So far I think there are 3 that I have counted." The Watcher asked if they were the ones who would fill the house with the young blood they had requested. The letters revealed an unnerving level of surveillance. The Watcher seemed to know every detail of the family's renovation plans. "I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be." One letter accused. "TSK, TSK, TSK, ... A bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy." It was as if someone was perched just out of sight, documenting their every move. The family was paralyzed with fear. Who was this person? A neighbor? A disgruntled former resident? The threats became more direct and terrifying. "Who am I?" the Watcher taunted. "I am the Watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now you are too, Broaddus family." One of the most disturbing parts of the letters was the mention of the children. The Watcher asked, "Will the young blood play in the basement? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream." This wasn't just a threat. It was psychological warfare, designed to dismantle their sense of safety in their own home. The Broaddus family immediately went to the police. An investigation was launched, but it had one dead end after another. They looked into neighbors, previous owners, and anyone who might hold a grudge. They even brought in a former FBI agent to do a threat assessment. The police questioned a few individuals, including some neighbors who behaved a bit strangely, but there was never enough evidence to make an arrest. DNA was collected from one of the envelopes, but it didn't match anyone in the system and only identified the sender as female. The letters kept coming, each one more specific and unsettling. The Watcher seemed to know the children's nicknames and even the type of car the family drove. The sense of being constantly watched, judged, and threatened became unbearable. The Broaddus family, who had poured their life savings into this home, realized they could never live there. How could they? How could any parent knowingly move their children into a house where an anonymous stalker was promising to watch their every move? They were trapped. They owned a house they were too terrified to live in. They tried to sell it, but the story of the Watcher had become local legend and then national news. Potential buyers were scared away. They even tried to get permission to tear down the house and build 2 new ones, but the town's planning board denied their request, adding another layer of frustration to their ordeal. For years, the family was in a state of limbo, paying the mortgage and taxes on a property that was the source of their deepest fears. They even rented it out for a while, and surprisingly, the renters received a letter from the watcher as well, threatening revenge on the Broaddus family. Finally, in 2019, 5 long, nightmarish years after they bought it, the Broaddus family managed to sell 657 Boulevard at a significant financial loss. But the real loss was their peace of mind. The identity of the watcher remains one of America's most chilling, unsolved mysteries. Who was it? Was it a lonely, disturbed neighbor playing a sick game? Someone with a historical grudge against the property? Or was it, as some theories suggest, a clever fabrication? Some people have even speculated that the Broaddus family might have sent the letters themselves to get out of a financial bind, an accusation they have vehemently denied and for which there is absolutely no evidence. The emotional and financial toll on the family was very real. The house at 657 Boulevard still stands today, now owned by a new family who, thankfully, has not reported any letters. But this story lingers. It's a terrifying reminder that sometimes the most frightening monsters are not ghosts or ghouls, but the person living right next door. The idea that someone could watch you, know your family, and terrorize you from the shadows, all while remaining completely anonymous, is a fear that taps into them and the primal anxieties. The Watcher's final letter to the Broaddus family contained a chilling promise. "You will be tired of me. I am tired of you, but I will never forget you. 657 Boulevard will not forget you either. And I am not the only one. There are others. More will come." The case remains open. The mystery of who wrote those letters, who watched the house, and why has never been solved. The eyes are still out there, somewhere, and the silence from 657 Boulevard is more unsettling than any scream. The watcher could be anyone. And that is perhaps the most terrifying part of this entire story. Imagine living in a remote farmhouse, miles from the nearest neighbor, completely isolated by a thick blanket of winter snow. Now, imagine hearing footsteps in your attic every single night. This isn't the opening to a horror movie. This was the terrifying reality for the Gruber family on their small farmstead, Hinterkaifeck, in Germany, way back in 1922. The family consisted of Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her 2 children, Cecilia and Joseph. They had just hired a new maid, Maria Baumgartner. It was a full house, yet an unsettling feeling had begun to creep in, a sense that they were not alone. It all started with small, inexplicable events. A set of house keys vanished without a trace. An unfamiliar newspaper from Munich suddenly appeared on their porch, a paper no one in the family subscribed to or had brought home. Then came the sounds, a soft creaking from the attic, a muffled thump in the dead of night. At first, Andreas dismissed it. "It's just the old house settling," he'd say, trying to reassure his anxious family. But the sounds grew more distinct, more deliberate. "It sounds like someone's walking up there," Cecilia would whisper, her eyes wide with fear in the darkness. Andreas, a man not easily spooked, finally decided to investigate. He searched the attic from top to bottom, but found nothing. No person, no animal, nothing out of place. Yet, the sounds persisted. The most chilling discovery came one morning after a fresh snowfall. Andreas found a single set of footprints in the pristine snow, leading directly from the edge of the dark woods to the farmhouse. He followed them, his heart pounding in his chest. They led right up to the machine house door, but strangely, there were no footprints leading away. It was as if someone had walked out of the forest and simply vanished into their home. He checked every lock, every window, but found no signs of a break-in. It was impossible. Yet the proof was right there, frozen in the snow. Over the next few days, the feeling of being watched intensified. Tools would go missing from the shed only to reappear in a different spot. Objects inside the house seemed to move on their own. The family grew increasingly terrified, sleeping with one eye open, jumping at every creak and groan of the old farmhouse. They told neighbors about the strange occurrences, about the feeling of a malevolent presence lurking just out of sight. They were living in a state of constant, low-level dread, unaware that their unseen guest was not just a fleeting presence, but a permanent resident, hidden right above their heads. This unseen person was living in their attic, subsisting on their food, listening to their conversations, observing their every move. Imagine the sheer terror of that. This silent roommate was a predator, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike. They watched the family eat their meals, listened to the children playing, and heard the fearful whispers of the adults at night. For days, perhaps even weeks, this intruder was a ghost in their own home, a phantom living in the rafters. Then, on the evening of March 31st, 1922, the waiting ended. The sequence of events that followed is a subject of debate among investigators, but the most accepted theory is as horrifying as it is tragic. Lured one by one into the barn under some unknown pretext, the family members met their fate. Andreas, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, and the young Cecilia were all struck down with a mattock, a heavy farming tool. The brutality was shocking. After silencing the family in the barn, the killer then went inside the house. There, they murdered the 2-year-old Joseph as he slept in his cot in his mother's bedroom. The new maid, Maria, was also killed in her bedchamber. She had only been at the farm for a few hours, her first day on the job tragically becoming her last. The most disturbing part, the killer didn't just murder the family and flee. For several days after the massacre, they remained in the farmhouse. Neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney. The livestock were fed, the dog was cared for, and meals were eaten in the kitchen. The killer lived amongst the bodies of their victims, continuing the strange, parasitic existence they had established in the attic. It was a home they had stolen through unimaginable violence. Days passed. The younger Cecilia hadn't shown up for school, and the family missed Sunday church services, which was highly unusual. Concerned neighbors finally went to the farmstead to check on them. What they found was a scene of pure horror. After discovering the bodies stacked in the barn, covered with hay, they alerted the authorities. The investigation began, but the crime scene was already compromised, with countless people trampling through the house and grounds out of morbid curiosity. Hundreds of suspects were interviewed over the years. Theories ranged from a jealous lover of Victoria's to a traveling vagrant, to even her own husband, who was reported killed in World War I, but whose body was never found. Yet, despite extensive investigations, every lead went cold. The murder weapon was found in the attic, but forensics at the time were not advanced enough to yield any conclusive evidence. The killer had seemingly vanished, just as they had appeared, leaving behind a legacy of terror and a mystery that endures to this day. The identity of the person who lived in the attic and committed these horrific acts remains one of Germany's greatest unsolved crimes. The farmstead was eventually demolished in 1923, as if to erase the terrible stain of what happened there. But you can't erase a memory that dark. Locals have long whispered that the land is cursed. They say that on quiet, snowy nights, you can still hear faint, mournful cries carried on the wind. They believe the spirits of the Gruber family and their maid are trapped there, forever wandering the site of their former home, eternally searching for the silent, watchful intruder who brought their world to such a brutal and terrifying end. They are still looking for the answers that we, a century later, are still seeking. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most chilling unsolved mysteries. What do you think happened at Hint? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you found this story as fascinating and terrifying as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the dark side of history. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.